You're listening to All In. This is the podcast dedicated to helping you fulfill the mission of God in your life and around the world. I'm your host, Jeff Rupert. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of All In. And do I have a treat for you? This week I've got as my special guest the Reverend Dr. Karen Tremper. And I've known Karen for several years now. She is a professor of Bible and theology at Life Pacific College down in San Dimas, California. She's also the director of Global Life. She's earned degrees in home economics from California State University in Fresno. She's got a master's degree. I think that's in theology, isn't it?
Master's in theology.
Master's in theology from Fuller Theological Seminary, and as well a PhD from the School of Intercultural Studies at Fuller Theological Seminary. And in this interview, I'm going to have to explore this shift between a bachelor's degree in home economics with an emphasis in food services to theology. I'm sure there's a great story in there somewhere that we're going to get into. Prior to Karen working at Life Pacific College, she and her husband Mark worked with Wycliffe Bible translators as linguists, working among... Now, how do you pronounce that particular group of people?
Those are the Eastern Keres Pueblo Indians.
Okay, the Eastern Keres Pueblo Indians. And you did that for 10 years. And then she's also worked with Youth with a Mission as a staff person and then as the director of the discipleship training schools in the United Kingdom. And Karen is known for her passion for raising up the next generation and using the globe as her classroom. Karen, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks.
Hey, I'd like to unpack some stuff with you. First of all, starting on your professional level as a professor. As a professor at a Bible college, what are some of the trends that you are seeing with students and within academia, and what does it portend for the future of the church?
Well, in the time of, since I've been doing training for really the last 20 years, you've seen a real change in the audience. The audience is much more connected with each other, sometimes I wouldn't say in greater depth with each other, but very much more connected. You have a whole generation of students right now that want to do things as groups, teams. They like teams. But they're very sometimes they're globally aware, sometimes they're not globally aware, but they all have a desire to travel. Whenever I ask a student, say, hey, what do you want to do? They say, I want to travel. I want to go places. And the thought of going around the globe seems possible to them. And not only is it possible, they see themselves working outside of the country, that's a change. I've not seen that until recently. Over the past 2 or 3 years, I've seen that radical change in students. And they're savvy. So if they don't know something, they Google it. This last group of students that were out of the country during study abroad, one of the students took it upon himself to find out what was the top 10 things to do in any city they were in. And I've never had a student do that before, ever. I mean, they're interested, they want to go, but I've never had a student be savvy like that. So that's a real change I've seen in students just in terms of wanting to be out among the nations. That's changed.
That's great. So what do you think that means for the future?
What I think it means for the future is for us here at the college, when we have students coming in as freshmen that have that desire, I need to capture them. And I don't mean capture them and say, oh, you have to go, but to explore with them how they see themselves going and network them with other students who have similar passions. So as they grow through their college career, they're not growing by themselves and sometimes then lose the passion, but they grow within a community of similar students with similar passions. And when you do that, then they can develop their vision, their passion for the nations, the possibilities for being around the globe, what that would look like, and explore it all in the safety net of their academic career. That's a real opportunity for change and growth.
That's great. Now you said that you've seen this transition over principally the last 3 years.
Um,
Now, is this? Do you think that this might be in some way related to some of the emphasis that you have been able to have there at Life Pacific on cultivating a global mindset amongst the students?
well, that's some of it. I think some of it has to do with the fact that we have now have a more of a global focus on campus.
Hmm.
That it's the possibilities are there. People are coming, attending here with that in mind because they see what we're already doing. They look at our study abroad programs and they say, "Oh wow, oh I could go to this school and I could have individualized attention and investment and go to the nations. At least try it." You know, students like everybody, we think we might like something or we think it'll work. We don't know till you get out there and try it. So we give people opportunities to do that, but they are now coming with those expectations. Oh, I'm going to try that out. Oh, I'm going to see if that really works for me. Oh, I really have a passion for this nation. Oh, I can go my sophomore year as an 18, 19-year-old and try it. And we have more and more students doing that sort of thing. And they do it with friends. I just came back from being in France, and I had one student sign up, and she went and got her friend to say, "Oh, we should do this together." And they went and found out they loved it. They loved
Hmm.
it.
That's exciting. Well, I know it's one of the highlights of my annual schedule to be able to go out and be with you guys in the early fall, late summer, early fall, when we have that whole week of emphasis and hanging out with the students and speaking at chapel. You know, if you can't preach at chapel at Life Pacific, you can't preach. Your preacher's broken, and
Yeah.
those are just some really fun times hanging out with all those kids with all that energy and. Uh,
Mm.
Now, you were teaching there when my daughter Elizabeth went to school there, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
I was, and I had your son-in-law as well. I
yeah,
had them both as students.
yeah. She went to Life Bridal College and came home with her MRS degree for sure, and
Yeah, he did.
and now she has blessed us. Her and Louise have blessed us with a beautiful little grandbaby who's 3 years old now. So we're very happy about that. That
So
was
that's a soon-to-be life student.
yeah,
You know, just doing
exactly.
their job.
Yeah, you may have her in your class as well. You just
That's
never know.
right.
You never know. Now, I had a conversation just last week with a close friend of mine, and he's a little bit younger than I am, and he interacts more with the younger generation, and he was talking to me about how he's observed in young people anymore who are sometimes going to perhaps they're going to college, for ministry or something, and they're talking about going into ministry as a career option rather than in response to a calling. And he was lamenting with me about how he feels that we've lost this sense of calling, that there is a vocation to which God calls us into. Has that been your experience? What when the students are coming and you're working with them, are they and I don't know how to say this any other way. Do you sense that strong sense that they have heard from God, they have sensed a calling from heaven?
Well, I think for me, in my role in global life, and how I view students here and the season of life they're in a radical change developmentally. For one,
Hmm.
you have to remember college students are in a radical change developmentally. So for
Right.
freshmen and sophomores, 18, 19-year-olds turning 20, they're finishing adolescence. So they may have a call in their life, or they may just have a sense that they're to do something, but how they go about doing that develops as they're here at the college. So part of what I do in my role is I walk with them in that process. So when they hit their 20s, maturity changes, how they view the world changes, what they want changes because they grow up
Yeah.
and they enter early adulthood. So part of what we do as Global Life is we partner with that developmental process. We give them experiences and opportunities, and then we do briefing and debriefing where we reevaluate. Okay, so you felt like oh I should do this, but God had spoken to me, and I want to consider these. these options as callings, and what would that look like? And so as you develop, just as a leader or just as a person and mature, what you might have understood as a child when God spoke to you, maybe at camp, when you were in high school, and then what reality looks like as an adult might differ. So we want to help them discover what that could look like as an adult. So how does if God's spoken to you and you feel like you need to be doing something, then what does that look like as an adult? So that you never lose that call,
Mm-hmm.
but you might change in how you practice that. What does that practically work out? So maybe you feel called to be a pastor, but maybe you're a shepherd in a workplace. Maybe you're a shepherd in a business, but you never quit being a shepherd. And maybe you need to be in a vocational environment. So that's okay too. But we want to partner with people so they don't lose that. What happens is they kind of can lose their way when they get to college and decide, well, I didn't hear God, or that isn't what I'm supposed to do. Well, yeah, you heard, but you heard as a kid. So now let's look at what that looks like for you as an adult, in the adult world. What does that look like? And we do some serious hand-holding around here, because that's a real, it's a significant time in a student's life.
Yeah.
These are significant times. I don't take them lightly. And that's part of why I choose carefully who our leaders are, who goes on trips with students who are outside the country, because we want to care for them, because it's kind of you do some hand holding is what I say, as they're kind of learning how to not walk as a teenager anymore, but walk as an adult. What does that look like as an adult? And so that when they're graduating, they know what to do. They know how to walk this out, because they're now at the maturity level where they can.
That's
So
great.
that's part of it.
That's really good, and it's good to have that kind of perspective on it. That you really are dealing with some wonderful, precious people at a very pivotal time in their life. It's setting the trajectory of the rest of their lives.
Right.
They're going
Right.
through all sorts of crazy changes in their life, and it's good to keep that in mind. Now, speaking of,
It's easy to lose them at that point. You don't have somebody who's inviting them into your home, having them sit around and have coffee and laugh, but also talk a lot about how does this look, and is this normal? I feel this way. Is that normal? Yeah, that's normal. Let's try some shoes. I always call it try some shoes on. Let's try some shoes on and see how they fit. And people find out, oh wow, what I thought God was saying to me is what He's saying to me, and these shoes do fit me. Wow, those
that's
are
really
great
good.
discoveries.
That's really good. Now, have you observed that the young people today are far more engaging with the older generation than, say, when we were growing up? I know when I was growing up, I would never have thought to try to have a conversation about some of this stuff with people around me. It was just, the whole, I guess I'd bought into the whole generation gap, that they don't understand me. And I just don't see that anymore with the young people. They love hanging out with I turned 50 last week. They love hanging out with the old folks. Yeah.
Yes, they do. And most of them is because we have fatherlessness.
Yeah.
And it's not just here in the United States, it's global. We have a fatherless generation of men and women who long for someone who will be their parent, who will parent them. So we always couch it in the frame of mentors.
Yeah.
We need more mentors. Well, honestly, we need more parents. We need more men and women who will be parents. Will you be a parent?
Yeah.
Will you be, and if you're of the same generation, if you're a peer, will you be a sibling? Because in the same way they have these fractured home lives of no parents, they have no siblings either. They don't know how to be a brother or sister either.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter whether you're a peer mentoring. I always talk about with my students who are in their 20s, who have people who gather around them. I said, you have followers. Are you aware you have followers? What are you going to do with those people? How are you going to coach them, love them, mentor them, invest in them? Just be a sister or a brother. So that's probably the biggest thing I find with this generation. If I say I'm having something at my house, come on over, no one ever cancels.
Yeah.
They'll cancel other things.
Yeah.
And I said to students, I said, how about we have a once-a-month gathering for people, just people who feel they love the nations, just to talk about it. Would you come? And they went, oh my gosh, when will you be doing that?
Oh,
What
that's
night will that
great.
be? And this is June. They want to schedule for next year so
Wow.
they can make sure they're there.
That
And
is
I, I mean, I literally physically sold my home and moved closer to the college just so I could accommodate that
serious.
desire.
You sold your house and moved closer to the college to do that.
Yeah, my house, the house I live in right now, is closes this month, and I'm closing on another house so that I'm 10 minutes from the college.
Wow. Wow. So
So,
you're pretty serious about this. Isn't preaching. This is real life right now, right?
no, it's pretty serious.
This is great.
Um,
This is really good. Talking about radical changes, can I explore this? What seems to me, at least reading the bio for you, there seems to have been a change in here. With you had a bachelor's degree in home economics, and then you've got a master's degree in theology. Is there a story in there, or was this your plan since you were
yeah.
6?
Oh no, no. I um, I have a degree in home economics because basically I got a degree in my hobby. I mean, I want when people talk about what they're going to get majors or what they're going to study, I say, that's your hobby. Don't get a degree in your hobby.
Uh huh.
Um, I I'd grown up on a farm, so certain things in terms of home economy, food service. When you live on a farm, um, when people, because you're far from everything, so when people come by, they don't come just for coffee. They
Yeah.
come for lunch and dinner. I mean, they're there. So hospitality was always a part of my life. So I thought, oh, well, I'm good at this. I'll just get a degree in it. And I loved food service. Again, I loved it because I loved hospitality. We always had lots of people at the house growing up. So that's why I started doing it. And because I was in a rural environment, there's a large farm bureau, all that sort of thing, where you invest in the community. So that
Okay.
was what I wanted to do. But then I met someone who wanted to live among the nations when I was in university. So we were actually in college together. We met in college, and I thought, well, I'd never thought about the nations before. Just never had considered that. It was never part of my thinking. I was going down the street from my mom and dad and have a farm because that's what they did. I love that, and as a home economist, it fit my world. But when I met this person who wanted to live among the nations, I thought, wow, I wonder if I can do that. I wonder if I can do that. So, like a good person following Jesus, I asked Jesus. I said, "Hey, Jesus, can I go to the nations too? We've never talked about that." And Jesus said, "Sure, you can go." That was truly the answer I got, and that began a journey to the nations
Hmm.
because I married my husband, who was a linguist, and then I went on to graduate school as well with him, and we did graduate work in linguistics, and we became translators. So we worked for some Institute of Linguistics as translators in a language group in the U.S. that had no it didn't have an alphabet. And what I discovered during that season of working as a translator and then working as a trainer with Youth with a Mission, helping students be experienced in cross-cultural environments, that most of their theology was wonky. I mean, wonky is a very British word, but
Hmm.
it was just weird. People had weird theology, and most of it was because they just had no educational background in any sort of theological studies or thinking or even working cross culturally. I thought, wow, you don't know anything. No wonder you do sort of odd, silly things that are offensive to the nations. So when we came home after 20 years working in a cross cultural environment, I thought, I'm going to go back to school. I had real encouragement from my students that said, you're a great teacher, but you can't get a job in the U.S. without some degrees. So I went back to Fuller and did a master's in theology, which really helped me understand just why did I think what I thought? What did other religious beliefs? What were other religious beliefs? How did it differ? Where were common thinking? Where was different thinking? So that's part of why I did a degree in theology. And I had been a member of the Foursquare Church for a long time. So when I finished with my master's, when someone said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, if I could do anything, I'd want to teach in the denominational college." So I applied and got on here as an adjunct initially. And then once I was here, I thought, I'll never get a proper job without a PhD. Mm-hmm. And my passion has always been the nations. So although I could have gone on and done a PhD in theology, and I had professors who recruited me to do PhD work in theology, that really wasn't my heart. My heart was always the nations. So I went on and did a PhD in intercultural studies because that was really, my passion was for the nations, but I wanted to get a firm foundation in theology. That's why I did a master's in that. But that's why I went on and did my PhD in intercultural studies.
That's good to know. Now, I wanted to kind of geek out with you for a few minutes because I love theology. It's my hobby as well. And so, who have been some of your favorite theologians and thinkers and missiologists?
Well, I mean, it's hard to let's see, how do you summarize all of that? So I'm actually a real fan of Dr. Parkanian out of Fuller, and he's a Finnish man, and he's a theologian, systematic theologian. But what's interesting to me is he takes into consideration not just the Western theological perspective, but also an Eastern theological perspective.
Uh-huh.
And so when during the councils in the early 400, mm-hmm. where you had this split East West, he takes into consideration an Eastern perspective, and the divide was over the role of the Holy Spirit.
Right.
And I find that really interesting. I think it impacts when you are traveling around the globe and you're dealing with Eastern perspective. You also have an Eastern theological perspective, not just an Eastern cultural perspective, which definitely you need to understand when you're traveling and when you're dealing with people cross-culturally. That thinking has probably really impacted me the most. So there's a lot of theologians out there in terms of their thinking. One, you don't have very many Pentecostal theologians thinking like that, and Parkanian is also a Pentecostal. So he's probably my favorite. Now, he's new in that world as opposed to some of the older theologians that I read, but I didn't find as useful. And because I'm a practical theologian, then I'm more interested in applied theology. How do you apply this much more? So what does that look on the ground in terms of the people we're relating to? How does that theology impact their thinking? And where are the divides? I'm always looking for the divides. Okay. And so then from missiologically, of course, there's quite a few people out there that are interesting. But I kind of approach some of my theological thinking more from a leadership perspective. So I'm highly influenced by Bobby Clinton and his kind of thinking. Also just looking at just organizational structure. So organizational structure, because my degree in intercultural studies is in leadership, mm-hmm. I'm much more interested in organizational structure. So then how do you structure yourself organizationally when you're working cross-culturally? And how does your worldview impact how you organize yourself? Because when you're relating to people from a practical theological perspective, if you can't relate to how they organize themselves, you have no conversation. So you'll have you can't build relationship because you're not approaching it from organizationally how they think, nor culturally how they think. So those are some of my the way I go about what I do.
That's really good. I was having my own nerdy moment last night. I had a evening at home alone by myself, and so I was just writing some stuff in my journal, and I'd been reading a theological book, and it got me to thinking. It was quoting a couple of theologians. I thought, now here's a small group I would like to be part of. And I got to think, what theologians would I want to be able to sit around and sit at their feet for, a year at a time, or just get them all in the same room together. And, I started making my own little list, and you'd probably resonate with some of it because it does contain Eastern and Western. I'm more of a over the last 10, 15 years, I've done probably more study from the eastern side of the Christian divide. So my list had Karl Barth, Kallistos Ware, who's an Orthodox theologian.
Yeah.
Of course, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien are my favorite,
Yeah.
even though they wouldn't be considered theologians. To me, they are. N.T. Wright, love
Well,
him.
they're narrative. There are systematic theologians, and then there's narrative theology,
Yeah,
which I tend to be more of a fan of narrative theology.
yeah, and I think that's where both Tolkien and Lewis are masters at the narrative theology.
Yeah.
I love N.T. Wright and Tom Thomas. Of course, Martin Luther, you got to love him. I bet he would be a
Yeah.
hoot. And John Chrysostom, he would be somebody I would love to listen to, and any of the Cappadocian fathers. And Hans Kung. If I could get all of those guys in a room together, I would feel like I had won the spiritual lottery. But yeah, that's my nerd moment there. And
Right.
sometimes you at least for myself, I have this little theological itch I need to scratch every now and then I have
Right.
to get back down in the dirt and play normal again. Now, let's unpack for a little bit the global life. If you were wildly successful at global life, in whatever that is, what would it look like to be wildly successful?
For global life.
Yeah.
Well, part of what I do here on campus is give people a cross-cultural experience. So to be wildly successful is for every student in some way or another have had a cross-cultural experience. That they've been out of the country. I think
Okay.
you don't understand your own culture unless you engage with another culture. It's hard to understanding your own worldview is difficult in isolation
Yeah.
because most of us surround ourselves with people who think like we think.
Right.
So to give them a cross-cultural experience, whether it's in an urban environment where we have quite a large immigration population, which is very easy to do here in Los Angeles, and which we do in the fall and spring. We provide some urban opportunities so that they can engage with other cultures within their own environment, or to take them out of the country. I think it's good to engage with the world, understanding that most everyone in the world outside of America speaks 3 or 4 languages.
Mm-hmm.
That's just normal. And the fact that they can only speak one and can't communicate very well in the one they do speak is good for. I think it's good for students. It gives them a global perspective. They watch the news differently. They engage with the world differently. I think they're better neighbors when they have cross-cultural experiences. So within global life, whether they do a short, like a short experience, a long weekend, 2 weeks out of the country, or an international internship where they can spend the summer in another country, just kind of looking around, seeing what's going on in another country, or spending a study abroad semester where they're still linked here with the United States, where they're taking courses out of Black Pacific College, but they're living out of the country. So they get to see other places. So we do that in Costa Rica, Panama. We also are in Greece and Turkey, where students just get an opportunity to meet people around the world and say, oh, they're not so different from me. They have the same kind of concerns I have. They love life the way I love life. And they get to experience a different worldview, which is, I think it's life-changing for people. It makes them pause. I think students need to understand that hospitality is the language of the world.
Yeah.
And if they can learn to welcome the nations here the way they're welcomed when they're outside of this country, that is an achievement for global life.
Yeah. That's great. I believe that it's going to pay great dividends on the lives of those students, in whichever path they end up going down. Travel makes you a better person. I really do believe
Yes.
that. I think it opens your eyes to things you would never see before. I remember taking a good friend of mine with me into Russia, and I took him on a crash course of culture and history through St. Petersburg and Moscow, and we had been there doing some training for pastors and stuff. And this is a well-educated man. And he's going, man, there's just a huge gap in my life that is missing because I didn't know all of this. And I think
Right.
I think it's great that you're doing that. And are you doing some of this because of this little funny fact about you that you had never left the United States until you were at least 30 years old?
Right. Well, part of it is, I just think because I think that the world is smaller.
Mm-hmm.
We are rubbing shoulders with people from around the globe all the time here in the United States, all the time. And I think it's good for a student to experience what their neighbor understands. So then they can see life through the eyes of their neighbor, not in their own country, but in their country.
Yeah.
And they can understand better what it's like to be a foreigner. I'm not from this country. Oh, I need to be more thoughtful of people who are either guests in my own country or who have come for lots of reasons to be living in the United States. And how can I be more welcoming? I think that's part of our thinking for followers of Jesus, that he welcomed people and he was hospitable. That's part of the culture of the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
So then how can we, as followers of Jesus, be more like God, be welcoming, be hospitable? And you learn that the minute you leave your country. You also learn where your own selfishness is.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to be selfish when you're in your own culture and you know how to kind of numb yourself so you never have to deal with your own weaknesses. But when you leave your country and you're a guest in another country and nothing is familiar, then everything that you use to numb yourself so you never have to face your own weaknesses, it all comes out. And so when you're in a cross-cultural environment, then you realize, oh, maybe I do need to grow. Maybe I am kind of selfish. Maybe I need to think about other people besides myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I also can't numb myself with all the social media all the time because I don't have access to it.
Yeah.
So it's really just this great environment of learning how to be selfless, learning how to be a better follower of Jesus, and how to welcome the nations in your own country, or if you're in another country, how to be a good neighbor. How do you be a good neighbor? How do you be a good follower of Jesus? How do you reflect what that looks like instead of being sort of an entitled, self-centered child? You know,
Yeah.
it's great when you're a child to be like that, but when you're an adult, that doesn't work so much
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. It's not so good. I know.
Yeah.
Where we have an apartment there in Athens, as you know, and we've been building some friendships with some of the businesses. We live down in the main part of the city, in the heart of the city, and it's a couple of markets where we shop and a little restaurant where we will go from time to time. And it has been amazing to me what a smile and a kind word will do. And
Yeah.
one of the markets, I was talking with one of the ladies who's begun to recognize me and stuff, and she said, "Well, what are you doing this weekend?" And I said, "Well, I have to fly over to Switzerland and I've got some meetings over there I have to go to." And she goes, "Oh, Switzerland, how lucky! Bring me some chocolate." And she just said it jokingly because that's what everybody says. You go to
Right.
Switzerland. And so when I went to Switzerland, I told Debbie about it, and we both laughed. I said, "Well, I want to do that." So when I went
Yeah.
to Switzerland, I bought her some chocolate. When I came back home, I went down to the market, took the chocolate down, and I tell you, she almost started crying.
Yes.
That I would even think about her while I'm traveling in another country and buy her this chocolate. And I just said, "Martha, this chocolate bar's from Debbie and I, just because we want to thank you for how kind you have been to us and
Mm-hmm.
welcoming us as guests in your country."
Yeah.
And she doesn't know much about me. She doesn't know all the things I do. She just knows I'm a neighbor, and she's been
Yeah.
very kind. And it's amazing to see. And we've got another one that's at a restaurant, and now the owner is just taking us under our wing. Every time we show up, he's giving us more than we can take. It's like, "No, please stop," and he's treating us like family, just
Yeah.
because you honor and you love them and appreciate them. It just really does open up incredible doors.
Yeah.
Well, I ask this question of every guest on the podcast. If I had a time machine and I could take you back to your 25-year-old self. So it's not that long ago, but go back to your 25-year-old self and give some advice. What advice would you give?
Oh, wow. Well, my 25-year-old self had two little kids. That's what I was doing at 25.
Yeah.
And one of my little kids has a severe disability. So one of the things that I would tell myself is enjoy the fruit of the Spirit more. And that means joy, peace. I'd laugh more. I mean, I'm a person who laughs all the time, but have joy, have more joy. Be at rest, be at peace more. The fruit of the Spirit is the character of God, and let that shine through. And not just shine through to other people, but let it shine through that goes deep into my own spirit and soul. That I'd have, that I'd laugh a lot, and I'd have peace a lot, and I wouldn't be so intense about life. Life can be done at us, as a stroll.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to be done as a 100-yard dash. And I think that's the benefits of being older is I do life as a stroll.
Yeah.
I don't do it as I always use this expression. We're not killing snakes here. Let's pause, let's laugh, let's sit in the presence of God and just enjoy God more and not be so intense. And I know I'm intense about life, but I would laugh more.
Yeah.
Because I just think that the very story you just told is how we engage with people. That we pause and we notice them and we take time to just laugh with them and love them and be patient and kind. Can we be more kind? And those are the things I wish I'd done in my 20s. And that's really the things I tell my students. Oh, let's just take a deep breath here. Let's just pause. Let's pause. And let's rest. And let's take a Sabbath. Let's enjoy the pleasure of life. Not in sort of a hedonistic, fill my life up entitlement way, but just enjoy that creation has done in the image of God in people's lives.
Yeah.
Just rest. Be at rest more.
Good advice.
That's what I tell myself.
That would be some good advice. Now, Karen, thank you for being with us. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, connect with you, what would be the best way they could do that?
The easiest way to contact me is through Global Life here at Life Pacific College. You can always email me. You can find me on the website. But that's the easiest way to contact me is my job here at Global Life, because that's everything that I do goes through the academic world that I live in, and everything I do is about teaching and training.
Yep. So we'll include links to that as well, and they could also just Google it. I'm sure it's lifepacific.edu is the main website, if I remember correctly. Is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And,
that's correct.
And they can find you there as well. So, Karen, thank you so much for being with us. It's been a joy and a delight.
Okay, great. Thanks. My pleasure.
Well, we're done now. Thanks for listening. This is Jeff Roper reminding you that the mission of God is too grand for mediocrity or average living. You were created for a purpose, and that purpose is found in the mission of God. It's your life. Now go live it.